In 1966, 1 in every 4 working Australians made things for a living. Steel in Newcastle, cars in Adelaide and Geelong, textiles in Melbourne, white goods in Sydney. Today, fewer than 1 in 14 Australian workers is in manufacturing. That is not a slow fade, that is a demolition. And it happened on purpose, decision by decision, with dates and signatures attached. This is the story of how the Australian factory job was taken apart and why the men who held those jobs were never asked. Picture a Monday morning in 1970. A bloke walks through the factory gate at 7:30. He clocks on. He knows every man on his line by name. He knows the foreman taught his older brother. He knows that if he keeps his head down, the company will still be there when his own son turns 15. The factory was not just a wage, it was a place in the world. It told a man who he was. It told a suburb what it was for. Elizabeth existed because of Holden. Broadmeadows existed because of Ford. Whole towns were built around a gate and a whistle. That world did not collapse because Australians forgot how to work. It was dismantled from Canberra, and the first blow came overnight. In July 1973, the federal government cut every tariff in the country by 25%, not one industry, every industry, in a single decision. Tariffs were the walls that let Australian factories compete with cheap imports. Cutting them by a quarter overnight was like removing a quarter of the bricks from a dam wall and hoping the water would be polite. Within 2 years, imports flooded in, and tens of thousands of manufacturing jobs were gone. The textile mills and clothing factories were hit first and hardest. Many of the workers were women and migrants in the western suburbs of Melbourne and Sydney. They were the first to learn what the country would later learn everywhere. When the walls come down, the water does not negotiate. The men in Canberra called it reform. They said Australian industry had grown lazy behind protection, and to be fair, some of it had. But here is the part they never said out loud. The plan was never to make the factories stronger. The plan was to let most of them die and to trust that something else would turn up. Then came the 1980s and the decade of the clever men. In 1984, the Industry Minister John Button launched what became known as the Button Car Plan. On paper, it was a rescue. In practice, it was a managed retreat. The plan pushed the car industry to shrink from 5 manufacturers and 13 models down to fewer companies and fewer plants, while the tariff wall around it was scheduled to come down, year after year, like a tide going out on a timetable. Nissan stopped making cars in Australia in 1992. That was the plan working exactly as designed. And then March 1991. Remember that date, because that is the moment the factory job was formally given away. The federal government announced that general tariffs would be cut to just 5% by 1996. Car tariffs, once above 50%, would be pushed down to 15% by 2000. 5% is not protection. 5% is a handshake at the funeral. From that day, every board meeting of every manufacturer in the country had the same item at the top of the agenda. How long do we stay? The answers came in a slow, grinding procession that anyone over 60 watched with their own eyes. The clothing factories went in the 90s. The white goods followed. Electrolux, Email, Kelvinator, names that sat in every Australian kitchen, shifted production offshore, one plant at a time. Mitsubishi closed its Adelaide engine plant in 2004 and stopped making cars at Tonsley Park in 2008. Then the final act. Ford closed Broadmeadows and Geelong in October 2016. Holden built its last Commodore at Elizabeth on the 20th of October 2017. Toyota shut Altona the same month. After nearly 70 years, Australia became one of the only developed countries on Earth that does not make its own cars. Now look at the numbers, because the numbers do not argue. In the mid-1960s, manufacturing was around a quarter of all Australian jobs and about a quarter of the entire economy. By the time the Bureau of Statistics counted in the early 2020s, manufacturing was down to roughly 6% of the economy and well under 1 million workers in a nation of 26 million people. The Harvard rankings of economic complexity, which measure how sophisticated the things a country makes are, now place Australia down among countries a fraction of its wealth. A rich country with the export profile of a quarry. The clever men said the workers would transition. That word did a lot of work. Transition to what exactly? Some found trades, some found warehouses, many found casual shifts, security work, driving, labour hire, jobs with no gate, no whistle, no foreman who knew your father, and no path for your son. Because that is the loss nobody in Canberra ever put in a press release. A factory was a ladder. A 15-year-old could leave school, start as a process worker or an apprentice, and climb. Leading hand, foreman, supervisor, a house, a car, a holiday at the coast on one wage. That ladder was not moved. It was cut up and sold for scrap. And here is the question that still hangs over every closed gate from Elizabeth to Geelong. Where did the money go? Australia dug up more iron ore, more coal, more gas than ever before. The country grew richer on paper every single year. But the wealth flowed through ports and boardrooms, not through factory floors. The mining boom employed a fraction of the people manufacturing once did. A big iron ore mine runs on a few thousand workers. The car industry, at its height, supported tens of thousands directly and hundreds of thousands through parts makers, tool shops and suppliers. When Holden closed, it was not one factory that died. It was an entire ecosystem of small workshops that had spent 50 years learning how to make things properly. Both sides of politics owned this. The tariff cut of 1973 came from one side. The 5% decision of 1991 came from the same side, and the other side kept the settings when its turn came. Nobody reversed anything. For 40 years, the official position of the Australian establishment in every party room and every Treasury briefing was the same. The factory jobs are not coming back, and that is fine. Then came the pandemic, and for a few strange months the country noticed what it had done. Australia could not make enough masks, could not make basic medicines, struggled for parts, for chemicals, for the simplest manufactured goods because the ships stopped and there was no plan B. Politicians suddenly rediscovered the word sovereign. There were announcements, funds, photo opportunities in high visibility gear. But an industry is not an announcement. It is 3 generations of accumulated skill, and skill does not wait around. The toolmakers retired. The fitters retired. The men who knew how to run a production line took that knowledge to the grave or to the caravan park, and no fund in Canberra can buy it back. Think about what a factory floor actually contained. Not just machines, habits. The smoko at 10, when the whole line stopped and men solved half the plant's problems over a thermos. The tool room, where the most respected man in the building could work to 1/10 of a millimetre by feel. The Christmas party in the loading dock, kids on shoulders, the boss shouting the beer. The social club, the footy tipping, the whip around when a bloke's wife was crook. An entire civilization ran inside those fences, and it taught things no university teaches. Punctuality, precision, the difference between near enough and right, and the factory fed everything around it. The milk bar across the road that did 200 sandwiches by noon. The pub on the corner that filled at 4 o'clock sharp. The parts suppliers, the transport yards, the tool shops, the engineering firms that did 1 contract for the plant, and 3 more on the strength of it. Economists later counted the direct jobs lost and called it manageable. They never counted the street. When the gate closed, the sandwich shop closed, the pub went quiet, and the suburb that was built for the factory sat there like a body with the heart cut out. Drive through the northern suburbs of Adelaide or the west of Melbourne today and the evidence is still parked on the curb. If you worked a factory floor in this country, none of this is news to you. You watched it happen from the inside. You remember the rumours in the lunchroom, the consultants walking the line with clipboards, the meeting in the canteen where a man in a suit thanked everyone for their loyalty. You remember the last day, the toolbox in the boot, the drive home in daylight at the wrong time of day. Stories like that one deserve to be remembered properly, and that is what this channel does. So if this is your history too, subscribing helps keep it alive. Because the point of remembering is not nostalgia. The point is accounting. Somebody decided in July 1973 that the wall could come down overnight. Somebody decided in March 1991 that 5% was enough protection for an entire way of life. Those were choices. Other countries chose differently. Germany kept its factories. Japan kept its factories. South Korea built new ones. They are not smarter than Australians. They just never accepted the idea that a first world country could get by making almost nothing. So walk past the old sites today. The Holden land at Elizabeth, carved up for warehouses. The Ford plant at Broadmeadows, quiet. The mills of Geelong and the workshops of Newcastle turned into apartments with industrial chic light fittings, rented to people who will never know what the building was for. The gates are still there in some places, rusted, chained, holding back nothing, because there is nothing left to protect. 1 in 4 working Australians once made things. Now the country imports its cars, its clothes, its appliances, its tools, and tells itself this is progress. The men who built those things knew better. They knew that a country that makes nothing eventually owns nothing and answers to whoever does. If you stood on one of those floors, if your father or your husband carried a Gladstone bag through one of those gates, say where it was and what they made. Name the factory in the comments, because the official record calls it structural adjustment. The people who lived it know it was a demolition, and the least this country can do is remember what stood there before.